Hello guys, welcome to my channel, We Are The Broken. This is my first video, so tell me what you think. This is Love's Loyalty. Cain was barely sleeping. He never could really sleep at night. His dreams were too haunting. They weren't nightmares though. They were bliss, tranquil dreams. Real life was the real nightmare. To wake up from something so sweet and open your eyes to be in pure hell is debilitating. Sleeping 10 minutes every hour was difficult, but what other choice did he have? He had to be well rested for tomorrow, at least semi-rested. The merchants he had been dealing with were expecting him and the package. That was the deal. Package clear, with no deficiencies, no flaws. Suddenly, there was a click, and the doorknob to the room he was staying in turned. He didn't have much money, so he opted to share a hotel room with complete strangers. They clearly didn't have much money themselves if they chose the same option. It was a young couple. The woman was young, around 23. The man was in his late 30s if the silver temples indicated anything. Cain's first instinct was to jump out of bed, flip the mattress over to use as a shield, and blast away at the door with his 9mm. Breathe, he told himself. He knew there was no real threat. There was still 40 miles between here and where he was to meet the merchants, so they couldn't have known his whereabouts. There was only one possibility as to who it could be. His newfound roommates. The door creaked open and Cain could hear them whisper, "Hurry up, you dumb bitch. Get in the fucking door. I'm getting poured on here," Brad said through gritted teeth. "He's asleep. I don't want to disturb him," Blair said in a much softer tone. She still couldn't figure out why they had to share a room. She told her newly wedded husband she paid for the room, but he would have nothing of it. So here they were, creeping into a room shared with a complete stranger. He could be a serial killer for all Blair knew. "This is our room too. Who the hell cares if he wakes up? Now open the door." Brad palmed the door over Blair's head, forcing it open past the point that was necessary. It slammed into the wall, leaving an indention where the doorknob was. They both entered the room, drenching the carpet with their soaking bodies. The forecast said there was going to be a downpour, but this was ridiculous. Water bled through their clothes, pulling at their feet, the carpet sopping up every drop. "How stupid can you be?" Brad said, squeezing his clothes, trying to get the water out. "I'm not stupid," Blair said. It was the wrong thing to say and she knew it, but she was just fed up. They had barely been married an hour, and things had already changed. Before today, Brad was the picture of sunshine. He held her hand when they were walking side by side. He would open doors for her, and the year they had been together, he hadn't even pressured her to have sex with him. It was pretty fucking awesome. The fact that he had a nicely chiseled face and the body of a Wolverine helped tremendously. Now he was suddenly cold and thoughtless. He hadn't spoken to her much after the marriage was complete. Not a real conversation. "What did you say?" he asked, clearly confused at her audacity. "Don't call me." The next word would have been stupid, but was cut off by a sharp, swift slap across her face. Her face jerked to the side, teeth splitting the inside of her lip, leaving a coppery residue on her tongue. Brad stood there breathing hard like a rabid animal. He was nearly foaming at the mouth. He had put up with her sweet, too nice, make you want to throw up demeanor, and for some reason he couldn't take it anymore. He hadn't thought to hit her, but now that he had, he felt a sense of power. She had the notion that she was the head of the relationship, but she was mistaken. It was him. He was in charge. He had the authority, and he would show her. She looked as if she was going to speak again, and Brad swiped his hand across her face again. The slap echoed throughout the room. This hit was a lot more forcible than the last and knocked her off her feet, making her stumble to their bed. Cain lay with his back towards them, stiff as a board, listening. He had heard the first slap and hoped no more would follow. The guy was drunk. That was a no-brainer. The smell of alcohol radiated the room, seeping from his pores, fuming from his breath as he spoke. Kane didn't want to do this. He did not want to do this. A crappy night's rest with strangers in his room was all he was hoping for tonight. Instead, he was going to have to get up and stop this douchebag and teach him a lesson. Blair landed on the bed and Brad was on top of her in an instant. "You filthy bitch. Never again will you talk back or think you're in charge." Brad slapped her along with every word he said. Each slap was enticing him to do more, fueling him on. Finally, he had his hands around her neck, wanting to squeeze the life out of her. She looked in his eyes, frightened by the turn of things. Her husband, her best friend for the past year, this wasn't him. His eyes were enraged. They hadn't turned on a light when they entered the room, and it was nearly pitch black. The only thing illuminating the room was a street lamp outside, shining through the window. She saw a flicker of something behind Brad, and the only breath she had left hitched in her throat. Clayne had silently raised from his bed and slid the belt from the loop of his pants. He eyed the target and slowly approached, wrapping one end of the belt around his hand, making a fist. Clayne tugged, and Brad instantly let go of Blair's neck to go on his own, the belt tightening, cutting off his air. They backpedaled together, and Brad rammed Clayne into the wall, trying to force off his assailant. Luckily, Brad had some training of his own and knew exactly what to do, but him being drunk made him clumsy. Once Blair was able to breathe, she sucked in the air, letting it fill her lungs. She lay there for a second, wondering how things had gone so wrong. How could Brad be so wicked after she was so good to him? So loving, so loyal. She sat up at the sound of the struggle that was happening around her. Their roommate was on top of Brad, beating him to a pulp into the floor. The beating was brutal. She could hear something breaking in his face and the sloshing sound of blood. Something shifted in her spirit. Clayne was about done beating this prick's face. He wanted to make sure his chiseled features would now and forever be known as chipped. Abruptly, he felt a sharp something a little more than a sting in his back. He looked over his left shoulder, only to see the handle of an object sticking out of it. The woman behind him was eyeing him warily. Before Clayne had a chance to move any further, she charged him, landing on his back with one arm wrapping around his neck and the other repeatedly hitting him. A crazed banshee. "Don't touch him again, you lunatic. You're gonna kill him," she said. Blair was frantic. This was her husband, the man she just married. There was no way she was gonna let this stranger hurt the man she loved. She beat, clawed, and even bit him a few times until she was finally thrown off his back, hitting the floor hard. She was dazed for a moment, but came fully awake when she felt the barrel of a gun pointed at her head. "You stupid woman. I risked my life to save yours, and you decided to attack me?" Clayne was livid. All this fuss, and she had the nerve to stab him in the back. He reached back and pulled the object out. "Where the hell did you get a knife anyway?" he asked after he examined it. It was a kitchen knife, about 3 inches. "I always carry one in my purse," Blair said, "for emergencies just like this." Clayne threw the knife on the floor, far away from the woman. He could feel the blood trickle down his shirtless back, and felt lucky he opted to slip on his jeans, putting his gun in the waistband of them. This bitch was beyond crazy. He could see it in her eyes that she was ready to pounce again. He stepped back to the wall, finding the light switch, flipping it on. He gave her the once-over, taking in her busted lip and tangled hair. Her throat was red and puffy with distinct hand marks completely covering them. Nothing permanent. Clayne could see her eyes focus on first the gun pointed at her and then to her companion and back again. Before she could make any decision, Clayne made his own. Blair looked on in horror as the stranger turned the gun to Brad and unloaded 3 shots in him, his body jerking as each bullet entered him, and then there was nothing. She opened her mouth to scream, but her injured throat prevented the sound from coming out. She was sure she was next. This was not the trip Clayne had wanted to take. Get a hotel for the night, get some sleep, then deliver the package. He didn't think he was going to have to kill anyone, and he wouldn't have if not for this woman. Now she was passed out in the middle of the floor, and he had a dead body bleeding into the carpet, and he only had a few hours before his departure to deliver the package. With a deep sigh, he got to work. "Wakey, wakey," Clayne said as he lightly slapped the woman's face. He had tied her up first and worked on getting the other mess cleaned. There was no way he could have cleaned the blood from the carpet, but he did the best he could with the soap and water. After stealing some money from the man's wallet, Clayne went to the front office and paid for the whole week's stay in the room. It was still early morning and dark outside, so he had no problem dumping the body into the dumpster at the back of the alley of the hotel. The woman still hadn't woken up by the time he'd finished. Blair awakened on full alert. Her hands were bound in front of her, and there was tape covering her lips. She didn't open her eyes, but she knew she was in a car and was driving on a bumpy road. "I know you're awake. Go ahead and open those pretty eyes," her captor said. She opened them slowly and took in her surroundings. It was early morning, with the sun slightly illuminating the sky. There were mountains and deserts all around them, and she instantly thought she was being driven to her death. She was going to be suffocated to death in her own grave while dirt was dumped over her body. Why else wouldn't he have killed her already? She sat up straighter, taking in slow breaths so she wouldn't faint again. Soon she saw what seemed to be other cars about 2 yards ahead of them and had a fleeting thought of hope that she would be saved. She focused on them as the objects got bigger, and she soon discovered they were 3 black sedans just sitting there. Her captor stopped the car 300 feet away from them. "We're here," he gruffed. Turning off the engine, Clayne stepped out of the car and made his way to the other side, opening the door and yanking Blair out. He may have pulled a little too hard, but he was still pissed and his shoulder hurt like hell. He brought her to the front of the car and waited. After hearing her muffled whimpers and growing tired of them, Clayne decided to take off the tape covering her hole. Besides, it will appear that she had been treated better than she really had. They would see her fat lip and reddened neck and think he was the one who had inflicted the injuries. "What are we doing here? I'm sorry I hurt you. Just please let me go." "I won't tell anyone what happened," she lied. They both knew it. "Help!" She tried yelling, but her voice was strained. Before she even could think of running, he grabbed a handful of her hair and held tight. "They don't want to help you, darling. They're here for you. Just stay still like a good little girl, and I wouldn't have to kill you too," he whispered, so his voice wouldn't carry. It was a threat with no merit, but he didn't want his package to cause more trouble than she was worth. He tilted his head forward, indicating her to look in that direction. They were coming. 6 burly men, all in black trench coats, sailing in the wind. Only one man trailed them. He didn't look happy. Blair saw the face of the loner, and her heart thudded in her chest, threatened to rip right through. The man was a cliche of tall, dark, and handsome. He had a buzz cut. He kept it short because he couldn't be bothered. Eric, the love of her life, or so she thought. She had walked away 4 years ago and he had never come to get her. She'd waited and waited, and not so much as a word from him. But now here he was, walking towards her, and without a doubt back into her life, whether she wanted him or not. Clean, Eric greeted as he threw a large black duffel bag at their feet. His eyes were on Blair, barreling a hole through her, but he didn't say another word. Clean pushed her forward, got the bag, and took off, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Once the threat was gone, Eric's goons left them, walking back in the direction of the cars. Blair stood there looking into the eyes of her former lover. She found it ironic that after all this time, he only came to retrieve her when she was a newly wedded woman. All she could think about was how happy she was that she and her husband Hank consummated the marriage. Eric would have been infuriated. He still hadn't said anything, staring at her as he was. His face was impassive, but she could see his eyes lingering on her injuries. Her split lip, red markings of a hand coming across her face, the swollen red neck. She would pay for letting another man touch her. She bowed her head in shame. Her agreement to her own shame fueled him into action, and he showed a reaction for the first time since she had been delivered to him. With what seemed to be, with all his might, he reared back his arm across his body and gave Blair a vicious slap to the face. She fell and hit the ground on the spot, but rapidly got to her feet. She knew the drill. It would only be worse the longer she stayed down. Before she was on her feet, he had already started walking away. He didn't look back, knowing she would follow. She stood there for only a few moments, counting his strides. Then she trotted slowly behind him, as she had been trained to, bounds and all. Hi guys, like I said, this was my first video. If you liked it, make sure to give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and leave some comments down there at the bottom to let me know how I did. Thanks.